Hello and welcome to Good Evening Britain, a Force for Good's weekly show, coming to you live from our studios here in the heart of the great British city of Glasgow, with me, your host, Alistair McConnachie. We are broadcasting on all our digital platforms throughout the United Kingdom and across the world. We're bringing you quality, pro-UK comment and analysis every Wednesday from 7 until 8 p.m. on YouTube, on Facebook, on X, and on TikTok. A very good evening to you all. Thank you for tuning in. Please do send us your comments. Please do send us your greetings. Please tell us where you're watching from on this beautiful, beautiful British evening. At least it is here in Glasgow. I hope it is wherever you are watching from. As I say, please do tell us. And folks, please do repost this on X and please do share it on Facebook. And please do give it a thumbs up on YouTube, because that is what helps the algorithm to disperse this out to more and more viewers. So now's the time to hit the like button. Now's the time to hit the share button. We've got a packed show for you this evening. We're going to be talking about Trump's tariffs, what they mean for the United Kingdom, good or bad. If you have got an opinion on that, please do send it in. We're also going to be asking whether the SNP-led council in Glasgow is finally waking up slowly to the refugee crisis, which it has brought upon its own head through its own virtue signaling. Is it waking up? Will it ever really wake up? Or will it go down with the ship shouting that it was always correct and there was no iceberg in the first place? That's the question. I'm sure you've got your own thoughts on that as well. Where shall we indeed begin? Well, let's begin with the flag behind me, which is the Scotland's Lion Rampant. It's one of Scotland's royal flags. Thought we'd fly that today because this was the day back in 2021 when the Duke of Edinburgh passed away at the grand old age of 99 years and 10 months. He famously never wanted to reach 100 years old, and he never did reach 100 years old, falling short by just a few weeks. It's also the same day, 9th of April, in 2002, when the Queen Mother had her funeral and she lived to the grand old age of 101. So quite a bit going on in Royal Britain on this day, 9th of April. So we thought we'd fly the royal flag in commemoration of those things, which we like to do. We were also flying a commemorative flag at the weekend because the weekend was one of our street stalls. And let's put up a pic there from us out at our street stall. There you go, with our banner. We love the great British city of Glasgow, is what it says, with our website, aforceforgood.uk, below it. And you won't see this on TikTok, folks. This is on our youtube.com/UK A Force for Good channel. And that flag there is the Union Jack with a V for victory design on it. It says 80th anniversary VE Day 1945 to 2025. That's 80 years. And VE Day, Victory in Europe Day, is going to be on the 8th of March. There's another close-up pic of that cracking flag, which we will be flying for the next few weeks in our studio and also on the street. Okay, and that's a stunning flag, again, from our street stall. That's a Force for Goods flag. Great design, a fantastic design, and a fantastic flag that really is something else. Catches the eye like no other with that brilliant red design. Good, good. Okay. So, folks, thanks for everybody joining on TikTok. Please keep watching if you want to hear the best pro-UK, pro-British commentary on the internet as of 2025. A Force for Goods TikTok channel, which has been knocking things out the park this week. We put up a video on TikTok. Wait for this, folks. We put up a video on TikTok, and it today has got 545,000 views. Wow. That drove our followership through the 20,000 mark on TikTok. That's not all, though, because that same video, one of our colleagues put it out on Facebook Reels, and as of today, it has 1.3 million views. Okay? 1.3 million views on Facebook Reels, and on our Instagram Reels, it's got over 95,000 views. And what was that video? It was a short video that we played last week of John Mappin, the heroic hotelier who refused to take the government's money in order to defend his local village, to defend the jobs in his local village, as well as for safety reasons also. He refused to take the government's shilling as they were wanting him to put up the masses of asylum seekers in his fancy hotel. He turned them down. Good man. Well, the world congratulates him, and the world loved his video. Absolutely. Over 2 million views on UK A Force for Goods platforms itself. Great stuff. Great stuff. And well done to the team for pulling that one off as well. So let's talk about the tariffs that Trump is imposing, you could say, upon the world. And as I do this, I'm going to bring up a BBC article on the question, what are tariffs? Just bear with me as I bring this one up. There we go. What are tariffs, and why is Trump using them? Okay, well, it says here, basically, tariffs are a form of taxes charged on goods brought from other countries. Now, the point here is that China, for example, everybody uses the example of China. China can produce goods at a very low cost because it has low overhead costs. So it can produce widgets a lot cheaper than Britain can produce widgets, or that America can produce widgets. And it then goes and sells those widgets in the British market or in the American market, and thereby undercuts British widget producers. The idea of a tariff is to make it a level playing field. So instead, say, for example, China creates widgets at £1 a head and Britain creates them at £2 a head, then what we do is we put on a £1 tariff for every widget, so that when China brings that widget to market in the UK, it's going to be at £2, the same cost that it costs a British producer. to produce the same thing. So it's about leveling up, at least leveling the marketplace and charging for others' products. So I've actually explained that better than the BBC does here. And so it's, why is Trump using tariffs? For decades, Trump has argued that the US should use tariffs to boost its economy. He says they will encourage US consumers to buy more American-made goods, increase the amount of tax raised, and lead to huge levels of investment in the country. And that's largely correct. Now, some people will say, well, that's still to be proven. The thing about Trump, though, the good thing about Trump is he said, well, let's take a chance on that. And there's not many politicians in this day and age who will have the nerve to actually go there, to actually say, well, this is how it could work. So we're going to try. Now, it might be a little tough in the interim, but I believe, he says, in the long term, it's going to be better for the country. And so that's really shaken up the whole world, because hitherto, largely post-war, the idea has been, let's just have free trade completely. Let's have minimum tariff barriers. There's always been some degree of tariffs, but let's have minimum tariff barriers, and let's just see where the cards fall. And the cards usually fall outside of the United Kingdom. That is, it's cheaper for all these other countries to produce almost everything than it has been in the UK. And so therefore, UK business has gone out of business. And I, as a pro-Britain person, have always believed that tariffs definitely have a price, a part to play in running a national economy. They always have a price, a place in the national economy, and they should be used carefully in order to protect certain vital elements of a nation's industry. For example, our energy, our steel production, much of our industry, things which enable us to create serious products will enable us to remain a serious country. If we can't anymore produce steel, we can't produce ships, we can't produce anything for our military, for example, without importing it. If we can't produce our own oil and gas, then we are utterly dependent upon the rest of the world simply for our energy supplies. So there has to be a degree of tariffs, and Trump is bringing back that idea, an idea that has been rejected by mainstream doctrine for many years now. And as an aside about mainstream doctrine, okay, we sometimes think that because we're always reading a certain point of view in the newspaper, or because all of academia has accepted something, that, oh, this must be the correct way that things must always be. When, in fact, what we're actually looking at is people who are doing very well out of the system at the moment, making sure that their particular lifestyle continues by making sure that the people who write on the economy, the people who publish books on the economy, the people who talk about the economy are all parroting the same thing, which is making me lots of money at this particular time. Thank you very much. So sometimes what we think is actually absolute reality is really nothing more than a system which is serving some people at this time, and they're keen for that system to keep going on. It's not as if, and this is definitely the thing with economics, there is no absolute economic perfection. Okay, there's always people doing very well for themselves, wanting that particular system to continue. And so when a disruptor like Trump comes in and goes, well, you know what, America is actually now going to start looking out for America after we've had generations of politicians in the pay of the markets, in the pay of the financial corporations. Now we've got a man who's going to turn things over And all you financial corporations and all you markets are just going to have to suck it up and find a way of making money out of the new system now. So it's very, very exciting times that we're looking at. And the way America goes, the rest of the world will start to follow as well. There's no doubt about that. So very exciting times. And it's so important. Another reason why tariffs are important is, I was thinking about this the other day. Imagine you're a country. Alistair goes to the supermarket every day, and the supermarket provides him with everything that he needs, virtually. Imagine I'm also the country going to China. So I go to the supermarket and I buy all the cheap goods and services, and I give the supermarket all my money. That's like Britain going to China and buying everything from China and giving China all its money. China's now got all of this money, my money. The supermarket's now got all of my money. What does it do with that money that I've given it? It comes into my house, or it comes into my country, and it buys up my house. It buys up my country. And you're seeing this in Britain and also in America. China, which has been living high on all this money that it's been getting from the West, is now using that Western money, coming into the West and purchasing the West, lock, stock, and barrel. Farms, businesses, real estate, it's all going into China's hands, which they're purchasing with the money that they've earned from selling cheap goods to us. So that has to stop. And Britain has got sold off to the rest of the world as a consequence of this free trade system. It's not just workers getting put out of jobs. It's literally given other countries the wherewithal to purchase our country. So if you are a patriot, then you have to accept that tariffs definitely have a role. And like all of these things, it can be in moderation, but it definitely has a role. So, but people who are totally against tariffs, you have to say, well, what's up with you, mate? What's behind your reasoning there? Is it self-interest because you're enjoying the present system as it exists at the moment? So we definitely don't want to sell off our country. And a couple of commentators here. Trump's new tariff war is radically rational, says Tim Stanley, who's always a sensible fellow. He's talking about a fellow here, the Treasury Secretary, urged a detox period to kick these nasty habits of absolute free trade. He said, access to cheap goods is not the essence of the American dream. The Trump tariffs are designed to be a foreign policy tool to bully Mexico. This is Tim Stanley speaking, to bully Mexico into policing its border, but also to generate revenue, to shift from buying things from abroad to making them at home, as well as to punish bad behavior by friends who dump their goods in the US market while penalizing imports from America. And some people will say, well, okay, isn't this going to make goods more expensive? If we can't get our cheap Chinese stuff, we're going to be paying more, are we not? And that's certainly rational, and that might be a consequence. But what the tariff promoters will say, and what remains to be seen, but is entirely possible, is that America will become more prosperous as a consequence. So more of the people will be in work. The people will be better off the people will be able to afford these goods. And because the nation is making a lot of money from tariffs, they might even be able to reduce other taxes such as income tax and so on, because America may be able to fund itself in large part from tariffs rather from taxes out of people's income. So it could all balance out in the end, and Trump is hoping that it's not just going to balance out, it's going to balance in favor of the American citizen. So really quite a radical option here, which could work. On paper, it could certainly work. And it's exciting times economically that we're living to see. And we need to encourage our own politicians to do something similar, or at least to take much more of a nationalistic view of the economy and not an internationalist view whereby they just let the country be bought over by foreign capital, essentially. Alan Cochrane here talking around the same thing, relating it to North Sea oil, of course, which is another thing. As he says here, why wouldn't we use what we have instead of buying what the USA is selling? We are currently importing 8.5 billion worth of its crude oil, when survey after survey insists that developing existing known North Sea reserves would produce enough oil and gas to meet half of the UK's needs for years to come. And furthermore, industry sources insist that developing new fields could produce a £150 billion boost. Then there are the two giant fields, Rosebank and Jackdaw, whose further development is stalled. The Labour government is officially stuck fast on a rock, which still says no to new North Sea development, but there is widespread resistance to this policy remaining. Absolutely. Absolutely. It needs to be done. We need to have that sort of thinking again. Let's have a look at some of your comments. Who was first in? Derek's first in, says, good evening to the AFFG family. Glasgow and the rest of the UK needs to wake up to what's happening with migrants coming into Britain. We'll be speaking about that in a moment, Derek. Hi to Oksana, and good evening to Debbie, and to Catherine, and to Budgie, and to Anthony, and to Alan, and to Rafa, and Kat. Hey, hey to you, Kat. Kim says, I've just heard in a local council meeting that the Home Office is giving £200 to everyone on the resettlement scheme. Interesting. What council is that, Kim? Rafa says, Britain needs to invest in its own interests. We need to be a new superpower. I second that emotion. Christopher believes the Chinese have had it too easy for too long. They have also been abusing the UK VAT system. Oksana says, use the oil reserves to heat our homes. Kim, it's Colchester. I think that area, Colchester, is actually an area heavy with asylum seekers. We're going to look at a map in a moment that purports to detail all the asylum seekers throughout the United Kingdom. And we'll maybe have a look at Colchester as well. Good. Clear Tone asks a question which I'm not sure what you mean by that. I think the people of England would accept our viewpoint, many of them. Clear tones. 100 says it's the Scottish Elvis. Thank you very much. Union Jack Union Jack says, balance the world monopoly. Who benefits? Hopefully, our governments will have our interests at heart. That's what we're hoping. He says, who needs China? We need our own country working. We certainly do. We need our own country working. It's been deindustrialized for many years under the free trade theory, which really is not true. We've got, actually, before I move on to the next point, let's look at some old tariff cartoons that we found on the internet. The first one's really good. Let's just remove that banner along the bottom, the top, that says crushed. Support tariff reform and help the British worker. And there's a ship called the Free Trader, and there's a businessman with a top hat looking on as his cargo of boxes fall on top and crush a man that says British workman. And the boxes say tools from the USA, from Italy, glass from Belgium, Swiss watches, toys from Saxony, silver and cutlery from Germany, pianos from Germany, boots from America. All of this coming in a way that the British workman is unable to compete with, indeed gets crushed by. And presumably, here we go, look, presumably the tariff reform means putting tariffs up. This one says, look at it from both sides. Buy British and be self-supporting. On one hand, you have your employment and wages, and on the other, you get money to spend. Buy British and be self-supporting. Okay. And another poster here says, to provide your wages, someone must buy British. That's true, isn't it? Set a good example yourself. Set a good example yourself. Buy British. Okay. Well, I always try to buy British when I can, especially food. I mean, that's the main thing that you're buying, isn't it? So buy British food, support British farms, and when you possibly can, buy British if you can find British things in the shops. William says, buy British or just ransack the stores seems to be the current trend. Yes. So it's very sad when you look at some of the videos on Twitter or TikTok, mainly from London, of youths, usually visitors from the Empire, as I like to call them, just ransacking, stealing. It's terrible. Terrible. William says, it must be a comedy show if you're saying the SNP are waking up. True. They're probably, I think they wake up and they go back to sleep again. That's their story. Thanks for the comment, Joseph. Clear Tones says, do you think England would accept being governed from Edinburgh? I think they certainly would. I discovered a very interesting point yesterday, which I couldn't believe, that Herbert Asquith, who was the Prime Minister who took Britain into World War I had just presumed like he was a London MP. He was the MP for East Fife. He was the MP for East Fife when he took Britain into war in 1914, and he had been the MP for East Fife since 1886, and he remained the MP for East Fife until the end of World War II. And then in 1920, he became the MP for Paisley for 4 years, and then he died in 1925. that amazed me that he was the Prime Minister for East Fife. Sorry, the MP for East Fife. And of course, at the same time that he was MP for East Fife, Winston Churchill was the MP for Dundee. And Winston Churchill remained the MP for Dundee until 1922, a period of 14 years being the MP for Dundee. So I think that it doesn't really matter where the actual place of where the actual parliament is. It's what matters is that we see ourselves as British together, and we see ourselves as looking out for the best interests of all of the United Kingdom. And in that regard, I think everybody in the UK can understand that, not necessarily agree with it, but they can understand where we are coming from. Kim says, Maggie's mantra was buy British. Well, I know that Bruce Forsyth had a song about buying British. And I know it was prior to Margaret Thatcher, though. I'm pretty sure that was 2 or 3 years earlier than Margaret Thatcher. Thatcher came on the scene in 1979. She may well have said buy British, but there was a specific buy British campaign, and Bruce Forsyth did a song, which is a handy little song, actually. So, yes, let's look at the situation of refugees in Glasgow. And before I speak about it, let me just give you some background on the difference between an asylum seeker and a refugee. Now, an asylum seeker, fresh off the boats, claims asylum, and they will get put in a hotel while their claim is being processed. And the Home Office is responsible for them, and the money to look after them comes from the overall British taxpayers' pot that the Home Office uses to give these people a small amount of essentially pocket money, but covers their accommodation and access to healthcare and so on and so forth. But they have to stay in a hotel. They're not allowed to work. And if they get found, if their claim gets agreed upon, then they are given what's called refugee leave to remain. Their status changes from an asylum seeker to a refugee. And when you get refugee leave to remain, then the wonders of the British welfare state open up to you on essentially the same basis as if you were a British citizen. That is, you will be immediately allowed to access social housing. You will be allowed housing benefit. You will be allowed universal credit. You will be allowed to get a job, and so on and so forth. So you're given 8 weeks to leave hotel accommodation. In this 8 weeks, you have got to find somewhere to live, because you are now given leave to remain in the UK. And I can't imagine that's particularly easy for somebody to find, but nevertheless, you are able now to claim housing, social housing and housing benefits. So there will be organizations that help you to get that. Now, a few years ago, noting that the rest of England was suffering from this, the SNP thought, I know what we can do. We'll say refugees welcome here in Scotland, knowing that none of them are going to come to Scotland, but we can virtue vent, we can virtue signal about what wonderful guys we are, because we believe refugees are welcome. What they never really thought would happen was that refugees would actually take them up on the offer. And so there are now thousands of refugees in Scotland with a legal claim to social housing that the fools on the SNP-led Glasgow Council have got to find accommodation for, are legally obliged to give social housing to. Now, this whole thing is absurd, and we're writing a book at the moment on how to change all of this. And one of the policies is that if somebody, that I would advocate, is if somebody gets refugee status, then they do not get full access to the British welfare system on the same terms as a British citizen. They have to pay their own way, which means they need to find somewhere to live, but they can't claim benefits. They can't claim housing benefits. Yeah, they can get a job, but they have to pay their own way. And you know what? That would stop a lot of people claiming asylum in the first place, because so many of these so-called refugees are just economic migrants who are hoping to get accepted as a refugee in order that they can then live largely on the British benefits system. So that needs to stop. It needs to be that if you're given refugee status, you pay your own way. And if you can't pay your own way, you have to leave. And you don't need to go home, but you can't stay in this country. You need to leave. That needs to become the new way of dealing with refugees, because it's utterly absurd that they are given the same rights as a British citizen. This right, by the way, that they have once they get refugee status is written into the UN Refugee Convention. That's why we have to give them these rights. So long as we are members of the UN Refugee Convention, we have to treat an official refugee in the same way as a British citizen, essentially. That has to end. And it's really only going to end when we leave the UN Refugee Convention and we set up our own asylum and refugee rules, which will be much more prohibitive, but will make sure we get far less people trying to game the system. So an article appeared just recently, indeed, in the Guardian. Let's do the Guardian's one. Guardian, whatever you may think about the Guardian, it's always got very in-depth articles which are well worth reading. Here we go. Asylum system risks, quote, damaging social cohesion, Glasgow City Council warns. Council says cost is running into tens of millions as homeless refugees are granted asylum across the UK, and they're coming to Glasgow to live, basically. And this is another thing about the refugee system, is when they become an official refugee, the cost gets shifted to the council area that they go to. So we in Glasgow, our council tax payments are going towards the refugees. While they're in the hotels and so on are paid for just out of the largely British taxpayer pool of money. But when they come to a council area to live specifically as an official refugee, that money comes out of our council taxes. And it's harder to keep track of them as well. It's harder to keep track of how that money is spent when it's just becoming part of the wider council pool of money. So it says here, Glasgow City Council is the largest asylum dispersal area outside London and has welcomed asylum seekers for decades. Yeah. But go back 30 years, how many asylum seekers were there in Glasgow? Probably just a handful. Well, compared to today anyway. But the unique circumstances of Scotland's stronger housing rights, such as a statutory duty to accommodate single adult males, means the current cost to the city is running into the tens of millions with no end in sight. What that means is in England, there's a statutory duty to house women with children and pregnant women and elderly and vulnerable people. But the Scottish so-called government, always wanting to virtue signal, widened that into a statutory duty to accommodate single adult males, which is absolutely blooming ridiculous, because single adult males can be shacking up with other single adult males, like many of us have had to do throughout our life, and just slum it, but no, apparently you get a house now as if you're as on the same basis as if you're a pregnant woman. Utterly just, that sort of attitude, that sort of virtue signaling, or I'm calling it virtue venting, in order to get one over on like the English, just irritates me no end. And that's the only reason they did it. Oh, what's England doing? Oh, it gives a statutory duty that you have to house single pregnant females. Okay, well, let's make it just single males as well. Oh, I can't. There we go. Over the past year, hundreds of people hundreds, oh yeah, right, mate, hundreds, more like thousands, who received their asylum decision elsewhere in the UK have come to Glasgow to access homelessness services. Okay, so not these people now are moving in on the genuinely homeless, like the genuinely down in trouble, the genuine poor homeless people that you see on the streets, the genuinely addicted people who have got trouble, the genuinely homeless. They now have to compete with basically the rest of the world, who shouldn't be competing with them just for homeless accommodation. Here you go. More than half of those in the city's temporary accommodation are from households that have been granted refugee leave to remain. More than half of those in the city's temporary accommodation. While the Labour government extended the notice period for refugees to exit Home Office accommodation to 8 weeks, it can take months for them to receive the documentation required to secure alternative affordable accommodation and for their universal credit claims to be processed. Well, they should be slumming it with their mates together rather than using up flats and homes in Glasgow. Well, they shouldn't be getting refugee leave to remain in the first place, right? But if they are, they shouldn't be getting homes along with it. It says here more than 1,000 people from elsewhere in the UK, coming from cities such as Belfast, London, Manchester and Birmingham, have come to Glasgow since February 2024 to access homelessness support, attracted by Scotland's housing rights. Now, 1,000 people, I am, to paraphrase Mark Twain, I am personally associated with more than 1,000 refugees in this area of Glasgow alone. So I'm presuming that's going to be more than 1,000, but there you go. I don't know where that figure came from. So the council is worried about this, and it's eager to meet the government's asylum minister, Angela Eagle, when she visits Glasgow. I think that was actually yesterday that she came. Last week, Alan Casey, who is the Glasgow councilman who is responsible for the homeless situation, wrote directly to Eagle asking for a face-to-face opportunity to discuss what he describes as the utterly untenable pressures that the city administration is facing as part of the ongoing changes to asylum dispersal. Well, utterly untenable is an interesting and strong phrase that he's using. And remember, these people are the most extreme virtue signalers in Scotland, and even they are saying that the asylum system is putting utterly untenable pressures upon the city. And anybody can see that, and anybody's been able to see that for a while. So it goes on here. He makes one or two he continues to virtue signal, but at the same time, it's clear that he is concerned. Glasgow is the largest dispersal area in the UK, and we currently house over 4,000 asylum seekers here. And the housing services provider, a company called Mears, have capacity for over 7,000. This is putting unprecedented pressure on our housing system. And then he just says stuff that's not even worth saying but he feels that he has to in order to maintain his virtue signaling credentials. But that attitude has to go, and more of the utterly untenable attitude has to come in. It has to come in. This system is utterly untenable, and the problem is the government allowing people to claim asylum in the first place. We need to come out of the UN Refugee Convention, and then we can start afresh with our own system, which will say that you don't get free housing if you're a refugee. You have to find your own accommodation and you have to pay for it. And if you fail to pay for it, then you have to leave the country. That's the answer. You heard it here first. And that is coming in because it has to come in, because the alternative is simply chaos. Absolutely, Kenny. Why is it our job to house the bloody world? Totally. It's not like these people don't have another country to live in. Like, this is our country. It's the only country we have. These people have another country. They can live there. I'm sure they can live at the other end of their country if they don't like what's happening at the other side of their country. Like, it's not our job to house the world. That attitude just has to go. William says, surely we must be able to renege on the UN Migration Pact. Well, yes, we can renege on any of these things if we have parliamentarians who will do such a thing. Kim says, during the lockdowns, our local hotels were full of illegals. Absolutely. Let's look at this ridiculous, or, well, worrying, shall we say, map of where the asylum seekers are, and tell me what you think of this, if it's correct or if it's just baloney. This is a map which purports to show the hotspots. It's from the Daily Mail's website, and it's from their article, Britain's Asylum Seeker Hotspots. Interactive map reveals how many your council has taken in, published on the 15th of March last month. And we can go here and see in the Scottish borders, and see, this is why I'm not believing this. It says the population is 116,000, total asylum seekers 3. That's like 1, 2, 3 in the whole of the Scottish borders. Does that seem right to you? Dumfries and Galloway, 86. West Lothian, 83. North Lanarkshire, 55. Glasgow City, there you go, 4,193. As I say, I'm personally associated with 4,193 refugees. Or wait, no, these are asylum seekers. These are not refugees. These are asylum seekers. This is the one I just can't believe. Stirling, in the whole of Stirling Council area, there's 2 asylum seekers. 2 of them. Apparently, there's none at all in the Highland region. In Moray Council area, there's none at all. In Aberdeenshire, there's 272. What about Aberdeen City? Aberdeen City, 352. Something tells me these figures. Well, these figures are indeed from September 2024. So let's say 6 months ago. Even 6 months ago, these figures must have been out of date. That must be it. They must have been like 2-year-old or 3-year-old figures or something like that. I don't know. I'm just speculating, because there's no way that in the whole of Stirling Council. There are literally no asylums. There are 2 asylum seekers. What about over here in North Ayrshire? 27. Anybody get any areas? Colchester. What was Colchester? Kim, where's Colchester? What council area is Colchester in? How many? Oksana says, how many are in Belfast? Belfast, 1,940 as of the statistics they were using in September. Colchester's in Essex. Ah, Colchester. It's got its very own write-up. 228. There you go, Kim. 228 as of September 2024. Sounds unlikely. I bet there's far more than that, especially since it's just outside London. Kenny McDermott says, great replacement in action. Kenny asks, how many in Edinburgh? Let's go over here and check how many are in Edinburgh. 0 in Midlothian, aye, right. 0 in East Lothian. I can't find it. It's City of Edinburgh, 173. Aye, 173, my you-know-what. If anybody's been in the City of Edinburgh recently, they must, you can multiply that by 1,000, I think. Yeah, Kim says there's far more than that in Colchester. Christopher says, quite rightly, if these figures are correct, I'm going to be the next pope. Kim says this, in Colchester, there's 450 families on the homeless list, and it's gone up over 100 since last year. Yeah, well, we know where the 100 have come from. Scotland Scorpion says, let's all move to Moray. Well, they're coming to Moray as well. There's literally nowhere we're going to be able to escape this. This is the thing. And the John Swinneys of this world are living in the 1970s, basically, where there's a small number of people coming in and they're all in London. And it's like, how do we integrate them into the London way of life? You know, it's not like that anymore. The integration is like, has been rendered redundant. The Boris wave has rendered integration redundant. And the reason it's rendered integration redundant is because integration is a very fragile concept, which depends upon very few people coming from abroad over a very long time. What happened with the Boris wave, and indeed for 2 or 3 years before that, was just a massive, huge numbers of people coming in that can't be integrated because their numbers are so huge, as we don't ever tire of saying. In the last year for which we have figures, which was to the end of June 2023, a population larger than Paisley, Scotland's 5th largest town, came into Scotland in the 12 months previous to June 2023. A couple of years have since passed by then. Those numbers will have been the same each year. These numbers are just ridiculous, beyond any kind of ability to, quote unquote, integrate, even if, you could, and because many of the people are not such that you could integrate them either. So this is going to be the major issue. And wow, I just want to say DTube has sent a super chat for £10. Thank you very much, DTube. Please, folks, thank DTube in the comments there. That's a £10. And some people make a living from super chats. You know, they have live shows and people are just sending in donations. We've certainly not been able to do that, but we do appreciate people like DTube who occasionally do click the super chat button, which is the little $sign below the YouTube video. Thank you very much. Kim says, cheers, DTube. Good. Well, I think we've gone around the houses with the Glasgow thing. Basically, to answer the question, is the SNP waking up? It's slowly wondering what to do as it rubs its eyes. And because it's the SNP, it's very likely just to jump back into bed again, lest it upsets the wrong people in its view. So I personally don't think that they are waking up, but it's a good sign that they're at least rubbing their eyes. Put it that way, shall we? Put it that way. Talking about Glasgow City Council, I've got a nice little thing to report. Back in February, I went for a wee walk down by the Clyde, just around Govan, and I came upon a crescent that was utterly manky. Look at that. This was in February. And that is just, everything about that is just like stinking up the great outdoors. And that was mud. And basically you could only walk on that little bit of tarmac around the side of it. And I thought, how come nobody has reported this? Because all you need to do, guys, is go onto the internet, find out who your local councillors are. You'll have 4 local councillors. Chat one of them up with an email saying, could you clean up this crescent, please? And my experience has always been good. They always have. So the first thing I did when I got home was I sent them that picture and I said, can you do anything about this, please? Asked nicely. And I was down there on Monday and look at it now. There you go. Look at that. Put the other picture back. And now what it looks like. There you go. There you go. Okay. Activism. Because folks, remember 99.9% of people are passive. They don't do anything. They always think somebody else will do it. Even when it's something like just reporting something to your local councillor. And it's never been easier. Just find out who your local councillor is off the internet and send them an email. And they will get back to you. They always will get back to you. And my experience of Glasgow City Council has been that they're actually very good at that. And they rely upon people pointing these things out. I mean, that is literally what we pay our council taxes for, to keep the place clean. We don't pay our council taxes so that it can house people who shouldn't even be in this country, in my view. We pay it in order to keep our streets clean. And they will keep our streets clean, but they need to be told where the areas are that are filthy, because they're cutting back, unfortunately, on the street cleaning things when they should actually be investing in it. So yes, that is my thoughts for today. Alan says that he'd rather the SNP didn't wake up and they just wither and die off. Well, all will be revealed next year on the 7th of May 2026, which is the next Scottish election. Kim says that she watched a Conservative MP called Katie Lamb give a great speech yesterday versus Jess Phillips on the rape gang inquiries and how Labour have cancelled them. Scotland Scorpion agrees. with contacting your councillor. And indeed, what a difference. Alan says, great, you make a good point. We should ask them to sort out these messes more. We pay our council tax after all. Yeah. Yeah. Especially another thing as well is blocked drains. The council doesn't know where the blocked drains are. They don't have, they should have, but they don't have a man walking about going, oh, there's a blocked drain, we must get that sorted. They depend upon us telling them. And in my experience, it's always been cleaned within 48 hours if you report a blocked drain. You know, we criticise the council and we do obviously have ideological differences with them on certain key matters, but when it comes to just like running basic things, they're not bad. They're not bad. Let me put it that way. It could always be better. There we go. A forceforgood.uk/union-supporters, folks. That's the address. If you like the work that we do, if you think it's worth continuing, then you can become a union supporter, which is to say a monthly donor from just 69 pence a week, which works out over a 52-week period as £3 a month exactly. And that really does help us. Now, this month, we're going to be on the street 2 times. The second time we're going to be on the street is going to be a front page newspaper event. Believe me, it's going to be a good one. We've got that planned. We're working on that one. We will tell you all about it next Wednesday. Okay, but in the meantime, if you like the work that we do, check us out at aforceforgood.uk/union-supporters, and anything that you can do there really does help. And if you'd prefer just to give a one-off, then you can go to our one-off donation page, which is aforceforgood.uk/donate to. And if you would like to help us, these are great ways of doing it. And also checking out our shop at aforceforgood.uk/shop-1. Folks, it's been a great show tonight. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for your comments. Lots of good comments. Thank you for all the people that have been watching. Please do share this post. Like it. Subscribe to YouTube. You know the score. It helps us get these important ideas out so that we can help transform the wider political field. It just remains for me to say that we'll see you next time. God bless our United Kingdom and God save the King. See you next week.